Welcome back, Camden Catholic. So I think I found my new permanent recording area with this dope chair that's super tall and is insanely comfortable. But anyway, so we left off in class talking about the Battle of Hastings, Harold Godwinson being challenged directly by William of Normandy due to the fact that he felt that he had a rightful claim to the throne when the current king of England died with no sons, right? And this is an intense moment in Middle Ages history because it's actually showing a noble family directly challenging the power of a ruling family, right? And this actually kind of shows how almost untouchable the Pope was, because who's going to challenge him? Nobody wants to go to the bad place, right? But how there was a giant power struggle between nobles and elected, or nobles and kings, right? Hereditary rulers. So we got to this point in class when we were talking about in 1066, Alfred's descendants died without an heir. Two people claimed the throne. Harold Godwinson's one of them, and then William of Normandy's the other, right? Well, the Battle of Hastings is going to be the event that breaks away and breaks out from this giant event, right? The Battle of Hastings is a conflict that breaks out over who should be king. And all has to, really quickly, write this word down. Write this word down. This is very, very important. Stop what you're doing. Write this word down. S-U-C-C-E-S-S-I-O-N. I think it's secession. And that's actually the order in which kings are appointed, one after another, after, for example, if I died, then my son, Chris Conti, takes the throne. Then if he dies, my other son, Lucas Dunn, takes the throne after that, right? So William wins the battle and actually becomes king of England due to a lot of different reasons. And particularly, one massive one is because Harold Godwinson actually died in the Battle of Hastings. 1066, Battle of Hastings, highlight it, circle it, massively important because it shows a giant power shift in European history. It's extremely important, so please don't forget to write that down, all right? So Harold Godwinson actually died because he gets shot in the eye with an arrow. A lot like Philip II, except this time Harold actually died. So could you imagine literally the statistical possibility of just being shot directly through your eye with an arrow and how unlikely that is to actually happen, but how insanely crazy that it actually did happen? So, because he was shot through the eye with an arrow. Now, anyway, so go ahead and make sure you get that written down. But this is actually how the whole thing played out. The whole thing started at 9 a.m., and Harold actually right here had his command post in the back next to this these roads and this different town right here. And he actually had this thing called a shield wall. But the crazy reason why William of Normandy actually ends up winning this battle is because he had his troops separated into different battalions. He had archers, cavalry, and regular foot soldiers, whereas Harold just had a bunch of regular foot soldiers. So what ends up happening is actually William the Conqueror directly strikes Harold's shield wall, breaks it apart, flanks the outsides, and takes the Battle of Hastings for himself, right? So William begins to centralize power and begins to claim all the lands in England as his property and gives lands to his supporters, creating a new set of nobles and a new feudal system that directly goes towards him. He also renames himself William the Conqueror, right? Not William of Normandy anymore, but William the mother-flippin' Conqueror, right? The biggest, the baddest, the best there ever was. One of the coolest things he did, actually, was he actually created a very, very effective system of income tax law in a book that he had written called the Doomsday Book. I know it's spelt Doomsday Book, but it's actually pronounced Doomsday Book. So, what the Doomsday Book was an actual account of every family and every single piece of property they owned, down to the sheep, down to the cow, down to the letter. And everyone's taxes would vary based off what they owned. So it was a survey of people living in England and what they owned and how much they could pay in taxes. This was used to create an efficient tax system. The Doomsday Book is phenomenally important also because it was also another form of the Roman census that actually was started by Augustus, right? Massively important. Doomsday Book. Make sure you circle it. Very, very important stuff, okay? Now, moving on, though, we got to go. I'm going to go ahead and cover this thing up just because you shouldn't even be allowed to see it yet because you're not even ready for this, all right? I don't think you understand how important the Magna Carta is, okay? The Magna Carta, Latin for the Great Charter, the document that begins to structure organized government in Europe. You literally aren't even, it sets down your most basic rights. You should, yay, Magna Carta! Actually, every time I say Magna Carta from now on, if you're a smart kid from my class, you will respond with an excited yay, all right? If I'm like, Magna Carta, yay, that's right, okay? You get excited about the Magna Carta. Know your rights. It's very important to know your rights. So, the Magna Carta is very important. It comes about 200 years after the Battle of Hastings. This is really important because it's the very first time that organized government in a Bill of Rights was actually set up in medieval England, right? So, as these kingdoms begin to organize, a lot of people realize that we don't have our rights specifically laid out, protected from our government as they begin to grow larger and stronger. But King Richard is a guy that we'll talk about again in a little bit. He's King Richard the Lion-Hearted, right? He actually starts one of the first crusades, or one of the later crusades. He was in the third one. But during a crusade, he was kidnapped. So his cousin, King John, is going to take over. But here's what ends up happening, right? King John begins to use and abuse his power, and he begins to attack William's descendants, or not William's descendants, he begins to attack the nobles of England. He actually lost most of the English lands in France lands to France in an expensive war, right? He began to raise taxes on the nobles to try and compensate for that war. Sound vaguely familiar? American Revolution, right? Nobody likes paying more taxes. So the nobles were outraged, and they raised a very small army and actually forced King John to sign the Magna Carta. Now, here's the thing. What I'm trying to get at is, remember how we talked about briefly how in all actuality, the king was subservient to the nobles when it came to power during the Middle Ages, right? So you need to remember that and understand that the power struggle goes nobles, king, even though the king is the figurehead and ruler of a country. Because the biggest thing about it is because he doesn't have his own army. He lacks a professional army. He has to ask the nobles to send their vassals to wage war. So the Magna Carta, thank you, is going to be laid down in 1215. Circle 1215 like a bajillion times. It's phenomenally important, right? The Magna Carta, seen here, okay, is actually much like our Bill of Rights and Declaration of Independence. The document is actually going to be written to limit the power of the king in England. So this actually makes England one of the most progressive kings or eras, or excuse me, one of the most progressive states during the Middle Ages. They're going to have a monarchy that actually has limited power, right? It means Great Charter in Latin. It lays the groundwork for what we call democracy in Europe. And it also established the legislative bodies of the British Houses of Parliament. And for my second period, you'll watch that goofy little video, which is really funny, those Parliament roast sessions. Tomorrow, my other classes, I'll show it to you as well. Okay? So anyway, but establish the British Parliament. Next to Parliament right here, you need to put a bicameral, B-I-C-A-M-E-R-A-L, okay? Bicameral legislative branch, okay? It's much like our Senate and House of Representatives, okay? Now, it wasn't bicameral yet. It just had a House of Lords, but it's still a legislative branch. They met to debate laws, pass new taxes, things like that. Keep the empire whole. So, the Magna Carta, the basic principles of the Magna Carta include king cannot raise taxes without the consent of his people, right? And that actually went to the parliament. If the king ever wanted to raise taxes, the parliament had to approve it first. This limits his power from just taking and taking and taking, right? Later, it's going to grow into the British Parliament. This Council of Nobles is going to be called the House of Lords, right? Also, the king was not allowed to arrest people without cause or take property without cause. No illegal search and seizure, no imprisonment without cause, right? These are basic principles in our Bill of Rights today, but it was all started by the Magna Carta. Yeah, that's right, yay. All right, anyway, so habeas, and remember, when I say Magna Carta did in class, I'm going to know who did and didn't do their homework, okay? Yeah, that's right. That's how I'm going to give you a 0 on this flip, or a 70 for, like, muting me. You heard me. All right, anyway, now, so, also it set up the idea of habeas corpus. Habeas corpus is the right to be convicted by a jury before you are sent to jail. Habeas corpus is actually really cool because it's Latin for the body of proof, right? That you have to provide proof before a jury before you can be sent to jail. Also, the Magna Carta laid down the idea that the king had to obey all the laws that the people had to obey, and he was not above the law at all, right? Very cool document. The Magna Carta is phenomenally important. 1215. Don't forget that. Now, really quickly, we got to talk about the power of popes. The power of popes, right? So, the popes, as you can tell, they're going to start to grab power because they see the struggles between the nobles and the kings of different countries, right? So, popes were very powerful spiritual leaders, but also they're going to begin to develop as a political power during the Middle Ages, right? Popes are going to begin to claim authority over rulers and other princes and kings and things like that. And this often led to conflicts between popes and kings. This is going to lead to that idea called papal supremacy. Pope Gregory VII is actually the craziest one, and we'll talk about him tomorrow when we talk about the medieval Catholic Church a little bit, all right? So, very good job. Very proud of you guys. Magna Carta. I'll see you guys tomorrow, all right? Have a good evening.